Last season, Juliet uncovered the conspiracy and the hidden truth inside the silo. So, she asked to leave the bunker and go outside. Everyone in the bunker watched Juliet fall and die on the screen, and they sighed. But the truth is, Juliet didn't die. Instead, she discovered that there are many other silos just like theirs. Even though the administrator of the silo, where she grew up, hid many truths, the toxic pollution in the outside world is real. Now, inside another silo, people are gathered in large numbers, preparing for an uprising. A panicked kid runs through the crowd and hands his dad a piece of paper. It says that the generator will be flooded in 15 minutes. A message from the engineering department. After 5 bell rings, they turn on the lights, launching an attack because they want to overthrow Russell's rule. Even though a lot of people fell, they finally managed to take back control. After the battle ended, the leader grabbed a flag and led everyone to open the hatch to go outside. But in the end, they all died at Silo's exit. Thousands of bodies were piled up thick around the exit, a sight that horrified Juliet. Among them were many skeletons of women and children. She walked slowly towards the silo entrance. Juliet picked up a hand-cranked lamp from the ground and went to the hatch, then used a crowbar and started to pry it open. The oxygen in her protective suit was almost gone, but even with all her might, being just a girl, the hatch wouldn't budge. Then she spotted a gap at the top of the door, stuck one end of the crowbar in, and threw her whole weight onto it. Finally, the door opened. Juliet stepped inside and closed the hatch behind her. At this moment, she realized that the arm part of her suit was damaged, so she rushed inside to find something to fix it. But the remaining oxygen was already leaking out. Her only choice was to use a hammer to remove the glass face mask to save herself. Luckily, the air in here wasn't polluted at all. Juliet poured 2 cans of water on the outside of her suit to wash off any toxic residue. Then, she found a flashlight and started exploring the abandoned silo. Everything was almost identical to the silo she'd lived in. The place Juliet knew best was the mechanical room where she used to work. She remembered her first time working in the mechanical room. Her job was to determine if things on the conveyor belt could be recycled. If those things were useless, they'd be thrown into the incinerator. One day, Juliet found a broken toy on the conveyor belt. She figured she had time to fix it after her shift to give to her work buddy, Shirley, after a night of non-stop tinkering. Her colleagues were amazed to see that Juliet had managed to fix it herself. They had no idea she was such a natural talent. As Juliet was walking, all bummed out, down to the lower level of the silo, she suddenly heard a voice coming from her room. She called out, but no one answered. The pathway leading to the room where the uprising took place had been destroyed. When she looked up, she saw a body hanging in midair. Juliet used all her strength to pull the body up. Then she cut the rope, tied the pieces together, and slowly climbed down it. When she got close to the other side of the bridge, she used her momentum to swing across. Unfortunately, the rope had been rotting for too long and snapped. Not only did Juliet miss the room, but she also fell to the bottom of the silo. Luckily, the place was full of water, which saved her life. Juliet struggled to crawl to the shore to catch her breath. After that, she found her way back to the room to change her clothes and bandage her wounds. Refusing to give up, she returned to the bridge, determined to conquer it. She gathered iron pipes and ropes from all over and put them together to create a simple suspension bridge. Using the principle of a pulley, she got it across to the other side of the room. Then, not forgetting to tie a safety rope to herself, she stepped onto the bridge. But the simple rope bridge couldn't hold her weight for long. At the last second, Juliet jumped and grabbed the other side just as the bridge collapsed. After crawling up, she discovered that the noise was coming from a fan. She let out a disappointed sigh and turned off the fan. Now, Juliet needed to find a way back to the stairs. Seeing a metal sheet nearby, she suddenly had an idea. Juliet gathered some gas cans and lined them up, placed the metal sheet on top, and then pushed it with all her might. Thanks to the momentum of the oil drums, this time she successfully created a solid bridge. Juliet smiled, satisfied with her efforts. She was about to leave, when suddenly a voice singing could be heard from behind. She followed the sound and found a mysterious room. She tried to open it but couldn't. It seemed like the only way to get inside was to enter a password. Just as Juliet gave up and turned to leave, a guy suddenly yelled from the cabin door. He threatened to kill her if she tried to get in here. Then he slammed the door shut, leaving Juliet stunned. Everything Juliet saw after leaving the shelter was also seen by Mayor Holland. Among them were hundreds of dead bodies near another shelter. He panicked and opened the rulebook to find a solution, but only saw a warning that if the cleaning mission failed, then prepare for war. Suddenly, an alarm sounded in the bunker. He quickly left and locked the door behind him. This door was identical to the one where the mysterious person had threatened Juliet. The judge was also awakened by the alarm. A subordinate informed her that the sheriff had not cleaned and had climbed over the hill in front of everyone. Please stay in your room to ensure safety. This caused chaos in the bunker. It was the bald head of the judicial department who raised the alarm because he couldn't find Holland, and he gathered the off-duty and reserve members of the suppression team. The purpose of sending Juliet out to clean was to prevent this situation from happening. Now the people down below are starting another rebellion. Holland calmed Sims down, saying he knew what happened and needed him to temporarily detain 2 people in the deep. Meanwhile, Hank comforts everyone because in the cafeteria, they all see Juliet cross the hill, which means it is safe outside. Every single one of them longed to regain their freedom on the other side of the gate. They prepared electrical devices to shut down the silo and start an uprising. Seeing that things were getting out of control, Walker used a high-pressure water hose to suppress the crowd. Although they dispersed, Juliet's departure had planted a seed in their hearts. Walker believed that Juliet had died because the oxygen supply in that suit was limited. At this moment, the bald guy came to tell the sheriff that this place was under his command. These were Holland's orders, and he wanted everything to return to normal. Then, he instructed Hank to detain Walker, saying that court security had a few questions for her. Mayor Holland went to Judge Meadows, hoping she could help them resolve this dilemma. Tonight, he would give a speech to the entire silo and wanted her to stand behind him to show unity and reassure everyone. He guessed that what helped Juliet get over the hill might have been the tape. His mistake was not sending Juliet to the mines when she stole it. He feared that people would riot to break down the door and go outside, causing everyone to lose their lives. But he wasn't afraid of what he thought, but of what he saw on the other side of the hill. The thousands of bodies he saw through the camera on Juliet's protective suit. It looked like a civil war had broken out in that silo, and their shelter was about to face the same fate. But the rule book said nothing about someone stepping out of sight. The founders hadn't imagined, or didn't want to admit that such a situation could happen. But today it did, and the entire population of the shelter witnessed it. Holland offered all sorts of attractive benefits, but still couldn't sway the judge. She took out a storybook about the Wizard of Oz, saying that she was just an imposter hiding behind cheap tricks. At the end of the story, she climbs into a hot air balloon and flies away. If he could promise to help her do that, she would help him. Hank has now locked up Mrs. Walker and another person in a cell. They're the two who swapped out Juliet's good tape with faulty insulation tape. Shirley's thinking along the same lines. She believes the judiciary knows the bad tape in the suits is useless and sends people out wearing them to die. She wants to find Walker to confirm her suspicions, but Holland's already one step ahead. They've thrown the 2 older women in jail. Walker is also discussing how to handle things from her cell. She feels that whatever the judiciary knows, they don't have any proof. But the real worry is that they'll find some snitch to rat them out, and then they'll be sent down to the mines or out to clean. To cover up the truth, the mayor has called everyone in the silo together to admit that today is a memorable day. All those who went out to clean have died on the hillside. But today, Juliet went out on her own and chose not to clean the censer. But she's no traitor, she's a warrior. He says that before Juliet left, they suggested using a new kind of tape to seal her protective suit. The fact that she could walk away from the hill proves this tape offers better protection. A huge breakthrough by the silo's talented engineers. They'll keep working to make the suits stronger and better, hoping that one day they can make suits that protect people from the dangers outside. The mayor's grand speech won over everyone in the silo, but Shirley showed up to shut down this whole pack of lies. Juliet had figured out they were using the bad tape on purpose. They never intended to use this new tape. Someone in mechanical had switched it out for Juliet. Soon enough, a security goon arrived to take Shirley away. Knox stepped in and explained that Shirley is one of the best techs in the silo. Maybe she just had a few too many drinks and was talking nonsense. Hank was also called to testify that he wasn't the instigator. Sims praised the mayor's ability to manipulate public opinion and offered to become Holland's apprentice. But Holland politely turned him down, warning him that the speech would only appease the people for a few days. The crisis wasn't over, so he needed the bald guy to remain in his position. The 2 men in the jail cell were also released. Sims, feeling down, went back to his room and confided in his wife. He couldn't understand why the judge had stepped in to help the mayor today, knowing that the 2 were once powerful rivals. At that moment, the mayor arrived at the judge's residence to express her gratitude, but she admitted that she only came to see him fall, and she was surprised that his handling of the situation was perfect this time. He had seen the graffiti that read, "Juliet's not dead." He wouldn't have been able to do it without the judge's help, and he apologized for having insulted and looked down on her in the past. After that, the judge poured out all the alcohol in the house. While still sober, She asked Holland to get her a good roll of tape and save it for her until the crisis was over. She wanted to do what Juliet did. At this moment, Shirley was yelling at everyone that Holland's speeches were lies, but Miss Walker stopped her because if she kept running her mouth like that, they'd all end up in the mines. Since they have eyes and ears everywhere, none of them are capable of doing this. So they shouldn't talk about the tape and Juliet anymore. She had heard over the radio, which was being talked about all over the silo, that Juliet was alive. Shirley was ecstatic to hear this. Back to Juliet, she explained to the man that she was from another silo outside. He asked which one, as there were 50 of them out there. This one was the 17th, so the closest ones were 16 and 18. Juliet was completely shocked by this news. She had no idea how far she had traveled to get here. At this moment, the man suddenly closed the small window, leaving her stunned. She wanted to talk to him more, to get some more information. "My name is Solo," the man said from behind the door. He had been here alone for so long that he named himself Solo. He slowly opened the door and said that no one forced the people to go outside. But the man still remembered that the weather was very nice that day, and they left on their own. Everyone was smiling and happy, but then suddenly there was dust. He figured the poison disappeared for a while and then suddenly came back, so everyone died. But Juliet questioned that the people who went out to clean all died within 3 minutes. How could they have survived longer than that? Solo didn't know, and asked how she was able to survive and get there. There had been a cleaner who went out and chose not to clean, just like her. He thought it was safe outside, so he left and wrote lies on the lens. Then he turned a corner and disappeared from view. 2 days later, this silo started to riot. Russell had known about it in advance, so he brought Solo in here and warned him never to let anyone in, no matter what. Even though the other guy didn't say anything, and left because people didn't see him die, they thought he was still alive, so they rioted and demanded to go outside. Juliet finally realized how serious her problem was. She had made the same mistake as the other guy, letting everyone think it was safe outside. She needed to find a suit to go back and inform everyone. Meanwhile, just like the situation in Silo 17 in her former shelter, someone started spray painting the walls to make a sign, implying that Juliet wasn't dead. Teddy was also arrested, suspected of doing this. Shirley suspected that Judicial had set him up, but her mother dismissed this, saying that this was their wall, so they had the right to do it. The biggest worry now was that her beloved son would be sent out to clean, but Shirley and the others were determined not to let that happen. At this point, Holland had also taken the judge down to the secret basement. There was a warning in the book that if the cleaning mission failed, to prepare for war and take note of graffiti and any celebration of those who didn't complete the cleaning. A graffiti artist had been caught in mechanical. Most of the cameras below level 120 had been removed, and everyone in mechanical knew this because Juliet had told them. Holland was convinced that Juliet had figured everything out. A hard drive had been found by her before the rebellion. Juliet had played a cleaning video that seemed to be from 200 years ago. She would insist on going out no matter what. The judge believed that Juliet had done what no one had dared to do before, so Holland needed to think outside the box, beyond the rules, and release the man arrested by the Judicial. The judge also learned that Juliet had reached Silo 17. Holland was sure that Juliet was no longer alive, because that silo had died a long time ago. The judge went to the new sheriff. She wanted the full report on Juliet's cleaning mission, and whether she had actively requested to go out or not. She knew that nobody wanted to live in a deep hole, and they couldn't walk in a straight line for more than 200 feet, except for Juliet, so when the report was finished, she wanted to see it first. On the other side, Juliet searched the bunker for a long time, but couldn't find any material that could be used as a protective suit. She returned to the bunker door and found a metal box on the ground. Solo asked her to open it. To her surprise, inside was some delicious chicken soup, which she hadn't had in a long time. Juliet scarfed down the rest of her food in one giant gulp, upon learning she couldn't restrain herself from making a protective suit. He told her that the protective suits used to be stored on the SX level, and the materials to make them were on the critical surprise level. But that area was now underwater. Juliet said she knew why people had to go out and clean the sensors, because after going out, they saw a beautiful blue sky, white clouds, and endless meadows. They felt they had to clean so that the people in the silo could see this scene, but Juliet didn't do it because it was complete nonsense. She knew everything was fake because the trajectory of the birds flying in the sky was the same as in the video she had seen before. It was generated by an advanced computer, so she didn't clean it and just kept walking forward. But she never thought that her actions could cause what happened here to happen again. At this point, Juliet suddenly asks why he was able to survive while everyone else died. Solo was silent for a moment, and then closed the small window, clearly not wanting to answer. Juliet walked over and placed the lunchbox by the door, as a thank you for the chicken soup. Just as she turned to leave, Solo opened the door again, saying that he only gave her the food to confirm that she was a real person. And then, he quickly closed the door again. That evening, Juliet was awakened by Solo's singing. When she got closer, he said that the firefighters in the silo had helmets and protective clothing to approach fires. They were also equipped with oxygen tanks and fire extinguishers, which could replace Juliet's suit. However, when Juliet arrives, she found that the lower level of the silo was completely flooded. At this time, the workers in the mechanical room, led by Shirley, along with a group of people, rushed to the sheriff's office. Knox and Hank tried to persuade them to calm down and return to their quarters. But what they wanted was Teddy's release. Suddenly, someone lit a fire and threw it into the sheriff's office. A deputy got up and shot at him, but accidentally hit a young boy in the crowd. This shot took the boy's life, which further fueled Shirley's anger. She delivered a powerful blow to Knox to vent her emotions. Knox recalled that when they were kids, they had discovered a wall below, not knowing what it was, but now he thought he knew. At this moment, the sheriff went to the judge to deliver the investigation results. After watching it, she returned to her room and turned on the projector. On it was a scene of a mother and child playing happily on a beach. Then, the desire for freedom rose in her heart once again. On the other side, Juliet returned to the bunker to find Solo for help. She could build a device that could supply oxygen underwater, but after going underwater, someone needed to stay on the surface to operate this device. But Solo said he couldn't go out there. He couldn't go out while Juliet was here. But she needed to get back to that silo. The lives of 10,000 people were in Juliet's hands. They needed to prevent the terrible thing that happened here from happening to her silo. If Solo could help her, maybe she could stop the impending disaster. These sincere words from the bottom of her heart touched Solo. When Juliet was leaving in disappointment, she suddenly heard Solo's call. He said he had never been this far and wanted to see how vast everything was out here. Juliet, acting as an unlikely tour guide, led him up above. Solo carefully took each step across the makeshift iron bridge that Juliet had created. It had been a very long time since he had been so close to such a pretty girl. Juliet led him around the silo, searching for materials to build the underwater breathing device. Seeing how skilled Juliet was at repurposing old items to create useful things, Solo showered her with compliments. It was then that he learned Juliet was once a talented engineer. Solo seemed to be very knowledgeable about the previous human civilization. In front of Juliet, he started showing off his knowledge. He talked about a very famous book called 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which featured a giant underwater vessel called the Nautilus. This vessel had a device that allowed people to breathe underwater to explore the endless ocean floor. Juliet was annoyed by Solo's long-winded story and quickly told him to be quiet. She needed a blackboard to design the underwater breathing device, so Solo led her to a classroom. Here, there were many children's backpacks, reminding Solo of the images before the rebellion. There was a girl named Lapis, who used to be his deskmate. Juliet skeptically asked him, when the uprising broke out, she was only about 11-12 years old. How could he have sat next to her? Solo was flustered and didn't know how to answer because he couldn't conveniently say it. Just as Juliet was racking her brain, the sound of a piano suddenly broke the atmosphere. To impress Juliet, Solo tried everything to get her attention, but Juliet couldn't take it anymore. She asked him to stop. Unexpectedly, Solo replied that he wasn't playing the piano, he was helping her. He tried to get Juliet to come closer and observe his feet. There was a pipe inside that blew air through a valve. When the player plays the piano, they can use it to push air down through the pipe, which solves the biggest problem Juliet is facing: how to transfer air from the ground to underwater. However, when he heard Juliet say she would dismantle the piano system, Solo seemed reluctant. He decided to play it one last time before Juliet did anything to it. At the same time, in the mechanical area of Silo 16, Knox led Shirley down to the bottom level of the silo. The walls were engraved with the names of people from mechanical who had participated in rebellions. As far as Knox knew, every generation had its uprisings. Some rebellions started due to food shortages from the farms. Others happened when factory workers went on strike, or even because of fires in the waste disposal area. Knox discovered that it seemed like every rebellion had one thing in common: blaming mechanical. In reality, mechanical was considered the heart of the entire silo. It controlled the energy that could make this place shut down. The boy's death and Juliet being sent out to clean had made Knox lose all faith in the management. But Knox had deeper thoughts than Shirley. Besides revenge, they needed to find what was truly important: the truth. As the head of mechanical, Knox had the right to meet with the mayor. He planned to bring a group of people to force the mayor to tell the truth. However, the problem was that the person really in power in the silo wasn't the mayor, but Judge Meadows. After discussing it, they decided to try contacting her first. The fact that the judge agreed to meet with the mechanical group on the lower level made Holland very uncomfortable. The bald guy, Sims, planned to mobilize 50 deputies on level 110 to go down there and suppress them. But Holland stopped him because this might help them cool down the tension. His only goal was to prevent uprisings. Currently, the judge had only one goal, to leave Silo. So she ordered Holland to quickly complete the protective suit for her. At home, Sims was very worried about the judge and the mayor meeting privately so often. The three departments were originally designed to keep each other in check. If the judge and the mayor teamed up, Sims' position would be seriously threatened. So Sims mobilized a group of people carrying banners to protest against the judge. Her first reaction was to suspect Holland, but he explained that he wasn't involved and suggested that the people were just scared. Specifically, the rumor that the mechanical group showed signs of rebellion had increased the tension. But in reality, she knew they just wanted to make better protective suits and would send a few people out to explore and then return. Holland warned that this was completely forbidden by the pact. The judge knew that perfectly well and planned to set up a committee to study the idea. She wouldn't be foolish enough to face punishment before taking off. Holland, although angry, eventually softened and invited her to dinner. Afterward, they both agreed to meet with the representatives from Mechanical to hear their demands. While two deputies were investigating the chaos in Mechanical, they discovered that the body of the man who threw the firebomb had disappeared. The person who took the body was none other than someone from Judicial. The staff described the dead man as a bearded man, around 40 years old. They speculated that someone behind the scenes had him silenced to eliminate evidence. At this moment, in Silo 17, Juliet had completed a simple underwater breathing device. She prepared to dive underwater with the breathing tube connected to the surface. Not used to it, she reminded Solo above to constantly pedal to create airflow. Juliet tied a rope around her waist, the other end connected to an iron block to help her sink quickly to the bottom. However, the length of the breathing tube was limited. She could only swim a short distance before reaching its maximum extent. Juliet took a deep breath through the tube and then swam quickly towards the fire station room. Unfortunately, just as she was about to reach the surface, the iron block got stuck at the bottom, preventing her from moving. Juliet tried her best to pull the rope and lift the iron block, but it was no use. As she was about to suffocate, her hand reached a metal bar above. Then, using all her strength, she bent the metal bar and used it to cut the rope. After relentless effort, she finally surfaced. She pounded on the locked doors and eventually retrieved a firefighter suit from a locker. Solo was now very worried because he couldn't remember if he had locked the secret room or not. When he saw Juliet emerge from the water in the protective suit, he rushed back to the room at full speed. Arriving to find the bunker door still locked, he breathed a sigh of relief. Solo used his hand to shield the keypad from Juliet's view as he entered the code. But unexpectedly, the bunker door didn't open. Solo couldn't believe it and tried again, but still no luck. Juliet told him to calm down. Maybe he had entered the wrong code just now. Solo snapped, suggesting that she had messed with it to keep him out. If he entered the wrong code one more time, it would be locked permanently. But she explained that she had been by his side the whole time. Solo tried to recall the code once more, and finally, the door opened. He immediately demanded that Juliet not come near the door, while he quickly slipped inside and locked it. Juliet was very disappointed, sitting by the door, because Solo had done this to her. When she stepped outside the silo to clean, she felt very lonely and scared. But she didn't die, and had to continue on the path she had chosen. So she understood very well the feeling that Solo was enduring. Just as Juliet was about to get up and leave, Solo opened the bunker door and came out. The two finally opened up and trusted each other. During dinner, Holland had slipped poison into the judge's food. When she realized it, it was already too late. He told her that her time was now counted in minutes. Although he didn't want to, he had to follow the pact to regain the unity of the silo. Before dying, the judge was suddenly asked about the hard drive that Juliet once had. Holland realized that the hard drive contained some kind of secret. When she heard him say that the hard drive had been destroyed, she breathed a sigh of relief. She revealed that even if he knew the secret, he couldn't do anything about it because it was related to a rebellion 140 years ago, with a piece of code left behind by the IT chief at the time. However, she didn't reveal the specific content. The judge realized the truth about Solo was a lie from 25 years ago. Before she died, she begged Holland to take her to the cafeteria. The judge wanted to see the outside world one last time, but Holland shook his head and gave her a VR headset to satisfy her wish. Finally, the judge took her last breath in the mayor's arms. Not long after, Sims came in with a package. Holland ordered Sims to handle everything according to his instructions. When it was time to meet with the representatives of the mechanical group, a group of deputies outside the judicial had blocked Knox and the others from entering. Knox had prepared for this situation. From the spiral staircase, they threw down a red water balloon. When their comrades on the lower level saw the balloon, someone immediately ran to shut down the silo's entire power system. At this moment, Holland came out and agreed to take them to see the judge if the power was restored. When a comrade threw down a white balloon, the lights in the silo quickly came back on. However, Holland only allowed Knox and Shirley into the judicial, while the others could only wait outside. Inside, they discovered that she was dead at her desk with a knife in her chest. Knox realized they had been set up, but if they panicked and ran out, the deputies wouldn't let them leave. With no other choice, they calmly told their comrades to return to the lower level. Holland knew that the person pulling the strings behind the protest against the judge was Sims, but he had manipulated Knox and Shirley into this situation. Then he hands over the job of suppressing the rebellion in Mechanical to Sims. He quickly riles up everyone there, spreading the word that the mechanical crew just murdered the beloved female judge because they wanted to open the airlock. But she refused. He led the mob, along with a large security force, down to the lower level, which was precisely why, for hundreds of years, every rebellion had originated from Mechanical. After stirring up the people, Holland went to see Sims at his private residence. He bluntly said that Sims had indirectly led to the judge's death, so Sims was no longer worthy of being his apprentice. However, he recognized that Sims was a rare talent, and it would be a shame to let him go. Therefore, he unexpectedly appointed him as the new judge of the silo. At this moment, things were far from calm. Surveillance cameras showed that Knox and Shirley had disappeared on level 70. The new judge had to send a special task force, disguised as civilians, to incite riots from level 60 to level 130, and offered a huge reward for anyone who captured the mechanical group. But Holland, still uneasy, ordered a barricade to be erected on level 130 to prevent the mechanical group from escaping. Knox and Shirley were hiding in an apartment on level 70. Following Walker's instructions, they found a mailman who frequently traveled between the silo's levels each week. They hoped this person would help them return to the bottom level of Mechanical. But tragedy struck when the mailman betrayed them for the huge reward. The group was forced to continue their escape. When they reached level 125, they realized there was no way out, because the obstacle on level 130 had already been set up. Meanwhile, Sims was feeling anxious about Holland's ruthless schemes. Holland wanted to use the mob to eliminate the people in Mechanical, to restore order in the silo, and erase all memories of Juliette's case. What was more surprising was that Sims' wife offered to join the manhunt to help reduce her husband's pressure. At this moment, Holland summoned Juliette's father to return some of her belongings to him. These items were supposed to be recycled for use in the silo, but Juliette's situation was special. Holland feared that if they were circulated, they could become symbols leading to rebellion. Seeing that after the previous riot he had participated in relief work, he hoped he would take on a more important role in the current situation, which was to speak out to restore order in the silo. However, unexpectedly, Juliette's father immediately refused. He said that he had nothing left to lose now. This place had taken his beloved wife, and now his daughter was gone too. He did this work out of a sense of responsibility to the silo. He was trying to practice medicine without deceit. Over the years, he had removed contraceptive devices from many young couples. Seeing the hope on their faces, he knew that hope was useless. His profession was like a scam. Whatever the reason, his daughter had left, her fate unknown. He couldn't control what she meant to people. Meanwhile, in Silo 17, Juliette had found a firefighting suit, but no helmet. She could only try to connect the old helmet to the firefighting suit. At this moment, Juliette asked Solo a question that we all wanted to know. This silo had been abandoned for many years, and the silo's generator was underwater on level 100. Why was everything here still working? Solo explained that there was a separate power source from outside the silo, but he couldn't explain everything to her clearly. Solo remembered that at that time, some members of the judicial had thought themselves clever and destroyed the underground water pumps on level 144. They thought they could use water to destroy Mechanical, but they messed everything up, causing water to flood the generator. Solo estimated that the water level was rising and would reach his room in another 10 months. He wanted to find a way to stop the water from rising, but the nearest pump was also underwater on level 30. He hoped Juliette could go down there and help him fix the water pump, but she said she didn't have time for this. She had to quickly return to the old silo to save everyone. Every day of delay meant more danger. The old helmet was unusable. She had to go to the security area to see if she could find a usable one. When she arrived, Juliet suddenly felt unwell. Solo thought she was hungry and hurried back to get food. Juliet tried to endure the pain and began searching. Although she didn't find a helmet, she discovered a record. In the staff list, she learned that an employee named Gina, who lived on level 17, had once borrowed a helmet. Juliet immediately went there to search Gina's house. While searching, she found a photo of Gina and a man. Under the photo were the names Solo and Tiny. But this man was not the Solo who was with her. Back in Silo 16, Lucas, who had previously helped Juliet repair the hard drive, was sentenced to work in the mines for 5 years. In theory, he could hardly survive in that environment, but Holland had someone bring him up and said he would give him a chance to redeem himself, which was to repair Juliet's broken hard drive. The judge's words before she died made Holland understand the importance of this hard drive. Knox and Shirley were stopped by an angry mob on their escape route. Before they could explain, someone from Judicial, disguised and mixed in with the crowd, shouted that they had weapons and then rushed in to subdue them. In a moment of danger, Sim's wife suddenly appeared. She used her husband's authority as the new judge to calm everyone down, and then led Knox and Shirley away. However, the two didn't realize that Camille wasn't taking them to Judicial. Instead, when they reached a camera blind spot, she helped them remove their handcuffs and led them into a room. After Camille left, the man in the room urged them to leave before she returned. He helped the two fugitives not because he was close to Camille, but because he was afraid of her. On the other side, Lucas had recovered part of the hard drive's data and discovered a map of the silo. However, when comparing it with the current database materials, he noticed some differences. Some wires were coming into the silo from the outside, some connected to the IT room, and some to the Judicial. He didn't know what those wires were, and at the bottom of the silo, there was also an unknown wire leading to somewhere. Holland asked him to continue recovering more data. At this moment, Lucas remembered an encrypted letter from Salvador Quinn to his wife. He was the head of the IT department 140 years ago. Elsewhere, the two sheriffs followed the trail of the arsonist, who caused the disturbance. They discovered he was still alive and hiding in the dark corridor at the bottom level. The sheriff told him to get the first aid kit, but the bearded man thought he was planning to take this opportunity to silence him. When he heard the sheriff repeat the oath before the pact about helping others, the bearded man began to mock that it was just a lie to control them, and they would never know the truth. The bearded man revealed that it was because he helped Juliet that he ended up in this situation. Now he didn't expect anyone to believe him, only asking the sheriff to use his gun to finish him off. At this moment, the sheriff handed him a piece of paper that he found in a book at Juliet's house. Looking at the paper, the bearded man seemed to grasp at a lifeline. He agreed to tell everything he knew, as long as the sheriff found a doctor to heal his wounds. Knox and Shirley refused to sit still and wait for death. They returned to level 70, subdued the mailman, and stole the cable he had hidden. Then they went to the level 120 staircase, secured the device and cable to the railing, took a deep breath, and swung straight down. When the police arrived, it was too late. The two had successfully bypassed the barrier on level 130 and returned to the bottom level. The enraged crowd, unwilling to let the culprits escape, also broke through the barrier and stormed down to the bottom level. Holland hastily called the sheriff on the bottom level, informing him that the fugitives from Mechanical had gone down there, demanding that the sheriff quickly arrest the two. At this moment, Solo had also brought food to Juliet. When asked about Gina, Solo tried to change the subject, asking if she wanted beef or chicken. Juliet continued to take out the staff list and said that the person named Solo in the photo was completely unlike him, but resembled a Shadow IT employee on the list. Seeing that Juliet didn't believe him, Solo started to get angry. He said that he was the real Solo. She didn't know anything, so she shouldn't say such things to him. Juliet was shocked by Solo's sudden emotional outburst. Seeing this, she was forced to apologize to calm him down. At this moment, Juliet's health was very bad, not because of hunger, but because her arm had previously been exposed to toxic gas and was only superficially bandaged. Juliet needed to find a place to lie down and rest, but as soon as she stepped out of the door, Juliet hastily sped up to leave this place. Her trust in Solo had completely collapsed. She didn't know what he would do next. Running to a room, Juliet began to lose consciousness. She removed the bandage and discovered that the wound on her left arm was severely infected. She tried to search, but found no medicine or anything useful to her at this time. Just as Juliet was about to find a bed to rest, a glimmer of hope suddenly appeared. Under the bed, she found a protective helmet. She happily grabbed the helmet, but only managed to take a few steps before collapsing to the ground. The rebellion on the lower level had erupted fiercely. It all started with a food supply crisis. Under Mayor Holland's orders, the task force began to block all goods transported to the lower area, not even sparing basic foods like fruits and vegetables. Even more terrifying, they also put blue poison in the food, using a despicable tactic to control the lower-level residents, forcing them to pressure Knox and Shirley to surrender. Holland had told his subordinates a meaningful sentence: just starve them for a few days in a row, and even a normally functioning society would fall into chaos. However, the people in Mechanical were not completely passive. They discovered that the things thrown down the garbage chutes were not always garbage. Juliet had become a symbol of their faith, and some allies from the upper levels had begun to send food through the garbage chutes. Holland's starvation plan encountered its first failure. As soon as he received the news, he immediately ordered strict inspections of those entering and leaving the garbage room, which once again put the lower-level residents in fear of food shortages. Facing the impending crisis, Mechanical launched an impressive counterattack. Knox secretly instructed the engineers to build secret weapons long ago. They were just waiting until everything was ready. One group conducted a frontal assault on the checkpoints to distract the task force's attention. Meanwhile, another group, carrying power drills, worked on the floors from below. After securing the wheels of the machinery, they tied steel cables to the iron doors. In just a moment, they had flawlessly executed this plan, then launched a pincer attack, leaving the task force overwhelmed. Finally, thanks to their numerical advantage, the lower-level residents broke through 10 levels of defense in a flash. At a critical moment, a deputy ordered the establishment of a new checkpoint at level 120. But they didn't realize that this decision would bring an unexpected victory for Mechanical, because level 122 was the farm area. When Holland heard the news, he was mad with rage. They planned to make the people on the lower levels so exhausted that they would surrender. But now the Mechanical group had captured the farms. However, this conflict hid an even darker secret. The sheriff, while interrogating the injured prisoner, discovered a shocking truth. The earlier firebombing incident at the police station door was orchestrated by Judge Sims Robert. Roth had used this method to create chaos, thereby providing an excuse for the subsequent heavy-handed crackdown. Knowing this truth, Billings began to suspect that the former judge's death was not as simple as rumored. Determined to find the truth, Billings used the radio to contact Mayor Holland directly. At this time, Holland still thought that the sheriff had captured the two fugitives he was looking for, but when he heard the doubts from Sheriff Billings over the radio, he had found the fugitives but wouldn't reveal their location at this time. First, Billings needed to open a full investigation into the events leading to the former judge's death. Before he could finish, Holland cut off all radio communication and said, "I just lost the sheriff." Meanwhile, Knox thanked Billings for assisting them, but Billings firmly replied that he was only following the law. In Holland's office, Lucas was still trying to decipher a complex code. Although the code in the hard drive was extremely difficult to understand, he had found a small clue. This code is about someone named Ali, the daughter of Salvador Quinn. Other than that, none of the words make any sense. Realizing that Lucas needed more tools to continue the work, Holland quickly decided to take him to the archives. This decision also implied that there were still greater secrets hidden inside the silo that had not yet been discovered. He led him to the most secret vault of the silo. As the Newit's shadow, Lucas was about to access a secret world that only a very few people knew about. When he stepped through that mysterious metal door, the scene before him was astonishing. This place was not only an archive, but also a precious treasure trove of human civilization. Holland explained that these artifacts contained all the knowledge in human history. What was even more surprising was that the books in front of them were just the tip of the iceberg. Most of the information had been encrypted and stored on a tablet. Holland had also searched for answers to all the questions he had ever asked, but only learned that the silo was built 352 years ago. The reason for its construction was still a mystery. Currently, Lucas's important task was to decipher the mysterious letter left by the founder, Salvador. Holland always had a feeling that this puzzle might hide a danger even greater than the current rebellion. Meanwhile, inside the silo, underground movements had begun. The people in Mechanical were preparing for their bold plan. Knox used explosives to shoot a device upward. When it reached the top level, it exploded, then deployed a parachute and rained down countless pieces of paper. On those pieces of paper were questions and doubts about the leadership, such as how the judge had died. What happened to Juliet? They wanted to know the truth behind it all. When Holland sees these words, he immediately panics. But what worries him even more is that the Mechanical level below has cut off all power. As the entire silo plunges into darkness, only the lights in the IT department remain on. causing the crowd to start questioning how many secrets the room is hiding. Mayor Holland has to take drastic measures. He cuts off all radio communication and announces that Sheriff Billings has been kidnapped. At the same time, he hands over all matters related to the rebellion to the judicial to handle. Even more interesting is the confrontation between Judge Sims and Holland. Sims once hoped to become Holland's true disciple, but Holland chose Lucas instead. In a tense dialogue, Holland bluntly said that Sims had lost his trust because of the previous betrayal, forcing him to painfully kill the former judge. Although Sims was very good at solving problems in judicial, his wife was too troublesome. It was she who helped Knox's group return to mechanical safely. This statement hit Sims' weak point. Meanwhile, at the bottom level of the silo, an investigation into the traitor was underway. Who had poisoned the food? Through investigation, an ordinary woman named Carla was accused of being the culprit. The crowd's anger flared up. They surrounded Carla, forced her to hold a knife for self-defense, and threatened to end her life. Chants for justice echoed everywhere. However, Hank knew the truth. Carla's mother was seriously ill and confined to the upper-level medical area, which became a deadly bargaining chip for judicial. She was tasked with being the judicial's eyes and ears, even forced to spread false rumors about the elimination of Shirley and Knox. The goal was to incite internal conflict, making people suspicious and turn against each other. However, Carla still held onto a bit of conscience. Even when carrying out the poisoning task, she tried to ensure she didn't harm anyone. Finally, people made the decision not to execute or exile her to the mines, but to give her a chance to redeem herself. Carla was assigned hard labor in mechanical, and, at the same time, a commitment was made to find a way to care for her sick mother. In the its security room, Lucas put his heart into deciphering the mysterious message left by Salvador. After many studies, he suddenly had a bold idea. Perhaps these characters were not letters but numbers. What excited him even more was that Salvador had twice mentioned page 77 in his encryptions. He believed this could not be just a coincidence. However, when testing this theory by searching the database, he didn't find any related results. Instead of being discouraged, this further strengthened Lucas's belief that Salvador did not use the books in the database to create the encryption. In a place where everything was tightly monitored, relying on a source outside the system's control was the only way to protect a secret. If Salvador used a book that only 2 people in the world could access, then this code would forever be unbreakable. It was from this logic that Lucas concluded that he needed to find an old book at least 140 years old, most likely a rare book that Salvador once cherished. Just then, Holland had a sudden idea. He opened a drawer and took out an object. He took out the Wizard of Oz book that Judge Meadows once read. In the adjacent silo, Juliet finally woke up from her coma. It turned out Solo had saved her life. Although Juliet had found the protective helmet she wanted, Solo had hidden it and proposed a condition for exchange. She had to find a way to unlock the water valve on the lower level, preventing the water from continuing to rise in the silo, and then he would return the helmet to her. Solo looked at Juliet and spoke firmly as if trying to convince her. Juliet was silent, but her eyes were full of worry. Solo's words weren't entirely unreasonable, but this situation put her in an even more difficult position. Solo and Juliet were still arguing about who to save first. Juliet promised that once she saved the people in her silo, she would come back and solve this problem for him. But Solo feared that Juliet might die outside, due to a problem with the protective suit. She had found her protective helmet, but she couldn't keep it in that silo. Or worse, keep it forever and never return. Currently, they have found some necessary items for diving. However, what worried Solo most was the decompression board that 20,000 leagues under the sea had mentioned. If you ascend from deep underwater too quickly, air bubbles can accumulate in your joints, endangering your life. However, Juliet doesn't pay much attention to this. She just questions Solo as to why he is making a woman like her perform this dangerous task underwater. Solo responded with self-deprecation that she was an engineer, so she knew what to do. Juliet challenged him back, asking why he didn't do it. Solo's answer was like an outburst. He yelled, revealing his most vulnerable side. "I'm a failure. If I go down there, I'll die." The fear of death and the explosion of years of self-doubt sent Solo into distress. Seeing him tormented by feelings of failure, Juliet decided to help him first. The two immediately sprang into action. Juliet stood on a metal sheet temporarily modified into a support platform, biting down hard on the breathing tube as the rope system slowly lowered her into the water. The lamp above them shone down into the black water, creating a faint beam of light like the only hope in the darkness. The deeper she went, the greater the pressure became. The surrounding silence was suffocating. On the way down, Juliet saw equipment that had been submerged in water for many years. Algae floating like ghosts. Above, Solo nervously monitored every movement of the rope, fearing any mishap that might occur. Only when the rope finally reached the predetermined position did he breathe a small sigh of relief. Now he just needed to wait for a signal from Juliet. Juliet had reached the target location, at a depth equivalent to level 8. She carefully secured the rope to the railing. This was her lifeline and her only way out. Then, Juliet began to feel her way forward underwater, connected to the surface only by the fragile breathing tube. At this depth, any equipment failure meant certain death. Juliet quickly found the target valve. She decisively connected the power source, then returned to the railing and pulled the rope repeatedly to send a signal to Solo. Seeing the rope move, Solo immediately activated the switch. The red indicator light turned on, and at that moment, Juliet turned the valve immediately. When the indicator light turned green, the water pump started working normally again. Everything seemed to be going perfectly, but fate likes to play tricks. Just as Juliet was untying the rope to prepare to return, disaster struck. The rope above suddenly snapped like a dying snake, falling into the abyss. Worse, her oxygen supply device also failed immediately. This was not a coincidence. She quickly took off her boots, which were hindering her swimming, grabbed the oxygen tube, and started climbing up. The oxygen in the tank was rapidly depleting, and a burning sensation spread through her lungs. Driven by survival instinct, Juliet decided to abandon all the equipment and used all her strength to swim straight to the surface. As soon as she surfaced, she gasped for air, miraculously returning from the brink of death. But what awaited Juliet was not safety, but a bigger mystery. She called out Solo's name, but no one answered. Climbing up, Juliet couldn't find Solo anywhere. Instead, there was only an axe and a pool of blood on the floor. The memory of the rope mysteriously breaking when she first arrived came flooding back, and a terrifying thought flashed through her mind. Maybe there was someone else hiding in this silo. It turned out there really was someone hiding in the silo. Juliet carefully picked up the axe from the ground. She followed the blood trail, step by step, hoping to find Solo. The deeper she went, the clearer the bloodstains on the ground became. But just then, a severe ringing in her ears suddenly struck. This was a symptom of decompression sickness, because she had surfaced from the deep water too quickly earlier. Although she searched for a long time, Juliet didn't find any sign of anyone. Worse, her knees began to ache unbearably, and her legs gradually lost sensation. To quickly restore her ability to move, she had no choice but to punch her legs hard, trying to awaken the numb nerves. In another development, Lucas was trying to decipher a code. First, he went to former Judge Meadows' residence, but found 2 judicial employees clearing out the belongings. Just as the 2 were about to chase Lucas away, he immediately pulled out the blue pass, a symbol of authority issued by Holland himself. This pass immediately changed their attitude, forcing them to obediently leave the room, letting Lucas search for himself. Although he searched for a long time, Lucas didn't find any clues. Reluctantly, Lucas shifted his focus to another lead. He used the authority of the blue pass to log into the database and began to trace the descendants of Salvador Quinn. At the same time, on the lowest level of the silo, an emergency meeting was taking place at Walker's residence. Due to the rapidly depleting supplies, Knox and the others had gathered to discuss a bold plan: sneak into medical to replenish their much-needed resources. However, this seemingly feasible plan was met with Walker's strong opposition. Her biggest concern was the safety of Carla, who was being held captive. No matter how difficult, rescuing her was the top priority. However, the others thought that a rescue operation was too risky. The argument did not conclude and ended in discord. Back in Silo 17, Juliet's health was deteriorating further. To ease the intense pain, she had to cling to a nearby air pipe, dragging herself step by step towards the water. The ice-cold water somewhat numbed her pain. The pressure in the deep water temporarily dispelled the symptoms of decompression sickness. Juliet tried to move her arms, feeling much lighter. Just then, another crisis suddenly hit. The oxygen pipe malfunctioned. The oxygen supply was completely cut off. Juliet was forced to immediately surface, but as she emerged, she heard footsteps coming from the upper level. Juliet immediately tightened her grip on the axe, cautiously moving forward. Unpleasant and unsettling knocking sounds echoed in her ears. Just then, a blinding light suddenly shone directly on her. In the light, the silhouette of a person appeared, holding a stick and wearing a steel helmet. The person shouted, warning Juliet to leave immediately. Just as the light went out, an arrow as fast as lightning shot straight into Juliet's shoulder. Juliet hastily retreated, trying to endure the throbbing pain. She pulled the arrow out of her shoulder, and then found a secret room where there was an emergency medical kit. She carefully used alcohol to disinfect the wound, trying to treat it as best as possible in the current situation. While treating the wound, Juliet silently swore that once she recovered, she would make these people pay dearly. At the same time, Lucas finally reached the residence of Terence, a descendant of Salvador Quinn. According to his speculation, Terence should have held important secrets, but surprisingly, Terence's family harbored deep resentment towards their ancestor. In their eyes, Salvador was a traitor who brought shame to the family. Because of this, their family was forced to accept the lowly job of cleaning wool for the upper class to erase the stain. Even when Lucas presented the blue pass, this family refused to disclose any information. Lucas reported this situation to Holland. The mayor then revealed a shocking truth. Salvador was not a traitor. On the contrary, he was the true savior of the silo. Before Salvador's time, the silo experienced rebellions every 20 years, each of which risked the opening of the airlock, causing the deaths of tens of thousands of people. To definitively end the cycle, Salvador devised a bold plan. He not only closed access to the server system and confiscated all books, but also blamed all these actions on the rebels. Even more astonishingly, he secretly added a special compound to the water supply system, a substance that made people gradually forget the past. This wasn't a sudden amnesia, but a slow process lasting a year or more, slowly erasing their memories. This seemingly cruel decision brought the silo 140 years of peace. With this astonishing discovery, Lucas decided to visit Terence's family again. This time, he apologized for his previous rudeness and revealed the truth about Salvador. Surprisingly, Terence's family seemed not entirely unfamiliar with this story. They revealed that the late Judge Meadows had once visited their family and had also praised Salvador as the savior of the silo. More importantly, Meadows had traded 2 books for an old pact that belonged to Salvador himself. Hearing this, Lucas was extremely excited and immediately returned to Judge Meadows' residence. After a careful search, he finally found that important pact. During the decryption process, Lucas discovered an important clue. If you've made it this far, then you should know that this game has been rigged. What did that sentence mean? Lucas was still unclear. Just as he was preparing to leave, Judge Sims arrived and solemnly warned Lucas, "Be careful with Holland. Once he gets what he wants, he won't hesitate to discard those involved." Before leaving, Sims also hinted that if Lucas needed an ally, he was always ready to cooperate. Just as Sims said, Holland was indeed very cunning and ruthless. To maintain the stability of the silo, he was willing to use any means. Meanwhile, on the lowest level, a bold plan was devised. They secretly climbed up to the weakest isolation level, using ropes, intending to sneak into medical to steal essential medicines. But as soon as the rolling door opened, they fell into a long-prepared trap and were captured on the spot by Judicial. It turned out that Walker had previously turned on the surveillance cameras on the lowest level. She hoped to use this to attract attention and establish contact with Holland. Understanding the implication, Holland went to the pump room on level 90. Just then, Walker's computer received a notification that the water pumping system needed repair. When Walker pushed open the door and walked in, sure enough, he found Holland already waiting there. Holland, getting straight to the point, laid out a cruel deal. If Walker wanted to guarantee Carla's safety, she had to become her eyes and ears on the lower level. Faced with this awful choice, Walker had no option but to give in. This heart-wrenching decision helped the law enforcement forces quickly intercept the group, sneaking off with supplies. Even though he fulfilled Holland's demand, Walker felt uneasy and tormented. When she returned to the lower level, Shirley immediately rushed over with bad news. Somehow, the law enforcement soldiers had discovered their operation. Shirley suspected that there might be a mole on the lower level. Faced with her teammates' suspicion, Walker could only stay silent. She used the excuse of being tired to ask Shirley to leave. But as Shirley stepped outside, Walker subtly turned towards the surveillance camera and made a polite saluting gesture. This small action made Holland chuckle. In Silo 17, Juliet was still persistently searching for Solo. Without him, Juliet couldn't get the helmet she needed to continue her mission. Juliet, carrying her equipment, carefully proceeded to the upper level. Soon, she discovered a suspicious piece of cloth on the floor. Juliet quickly pulled it out. Though surprised by the situation, Juliet quickly demonstrated her superior combat skills. After a few tense rounds, she gained the upper hand and knocked down her opponent with the weapon in her hand. When Juliet removed the other person's helmet, she discovered it was just a young man. Just then, a menacing voice sounded, demanding Juliet to stop. It turned out that since she arrived, she had been closely followed by 3 young people in the shadows. The rope that Juliet had been cut was caused by the girl holding the bow and arrow. Juliet couldn't grab the edge of the broken rope in time and fell into the water. At this moment, the man from earlier also went down the stairs to check the situation. Seeing Juliet struggling in the water, he couldn't bear to leave her and silently threw a bucket into the water, thanks to which Juliet was able to surface and gradually recover. However, his act of saving someone was sharply criticized by Audrey. She believed that saving a stranger was a foolish decision that could make the situation spiral out of control. But the man simply replied that he couldn't stand by and watch the main character die right in front of him. It turned out that they were a remarried couple with 2 children and were also raising another young girl. A total of 5 people living secretly in the silo. Solo had killed their loved ones, so they were always looking for ways to eliminate Solo. But before taking action, they had to get the password to the vault, because it contained essential items for their survival. When Juliet was diving down to close the drain, they secretly attacked Solo. During the fight, they accidentally cut the pipe with an axe, then shot an arrow into Solo's shoulder, successfully knocking him unconscious. Although the girl wanted to immediately end Solo's life, the man stopped her in time, hoping to extract the password from Solo before doing anything else. When they returned to their hiding place, the little girl rushed over to report that Juliet had surfaced from the water and was likely to follow the blood trail to find them. Therefore, they carefully planned to capture Juliet. Juliet immediately explained that she just needed to retrieve what belonged to her from Solo and would then leave without affecting them. However, Audrey made a condition. If Juliet could find the password to the vault, she would allow Juliet to see Solo. To ensure Juliet didn't escape, the little girl was sent along with her to find the password. After studying the documents, Lucas discovered many astonishing secrets about the silos. He revealed to Holland that the founders built not just one, but a total of 50 silos. Holland calmly replied that it wasn't a secret, as all its directors and their apprentices knew this. When Lucas asked about Juliet's disappearance, Holland admitted that she had entered another silo. However, due to the interruption of the signal from the helmet, they had lost track of her. When Lucas anxiously asked if she was still alive, Holland shook his head, saying that the chances of survival were not high because Solo had long since ceased to function. After Holland left, Lucas continued to focus on deciphering the password. Surprisingly, the password seemed to point in a clear direction. In Silo 17, Juliet said that she needed to find the password and leave as soon as possible. The vault only allowed 3 password attempts per day. A glimmer of hope shone in the little girl's eyes about possibly leaving, but Juliet said there was only one protective suit. The hope in the little girl's eyes immediately vanished, like a soap bubble. Just then, as the two were focused on finding clues, the unexpected appearance of 2 corpses made the little girl stop. She immediately recognized the familiar bracelet on the wrist of one of the bodies. The shadow of the past once again loomed over her young face. At this moment, an important discovery excited both of them. They found a crucial document stating Russell Conroy's full name and a supply department address. Although this address was not the same as what Solo had previously provided, Juliet suggested that this could be the vital clue they were looking for. The two immediately headed towards the supply department. When they arrived, they discovered that this was where Solo had lived during his childhood. While rummaging through the closet, Juliet discovers a complete protective suit. What was even more surprising was that the walls of the supply department were filled with densely packed numbers. Juliet observed closely and realized that this was the clue to opening the vault. However, finding the correct password in this mess of numbers was not simple. After a long time calculating, they finally identified a few potential password groups. The two immediately went to the vault and tried entering the passwords, but the first and second attempts failed. If the last attempt was also wrong, they would have to wait until 24 hours later to try again. Juliet anxiously said that if so, Solo might die from his severe wounds. In this tense moment, Juliet suddenly recalled a previous conversation with Solo, combined with the desk in Solo's house, from which she deduced his true identity. It turned out that when the rebellion occurred, Solo was only 12 years old when he entered the vault. Therefore, she decided to change her strategy and sought out Rick, hoping to meet Solo directly and ask him for the correct password. The little girl handed over Rick's mother's keepsake. After that, they reached Rick's secret hideout and found Solo in a severely injured state. Juliet patiently talked with Solo, but he just kept blaming himself for failing and constantly mentioned being Russell's student. Solo said that Russell only taught him one thing, but he had failed that trust. However, Juliet's words awakened memories that seemed to be buried within Solo. He was Russell's son. At this moment, an enraged Audrey approached and asked why Solo had killed their parents. Only now did Solo reveal a shocking secret. His real name was Jimmy. During the rebellion when he was just 12 years old, Jimmy was too tired and fell asleep while guarding the vault. When he was awakened by the sound of gunfire, he discovered that someone had broken into the food storage. Before leaving, his father had told him that under no circumstances should he let anyone into the vault. Because he promised his father, Jimmy made a cold decision. He broke the doorknob and locked the intruders inside. The people locked in the vault were Rick and Audrey's parents. Solo explained that he was later shot by them, and his act of killing their parents was only self-defense. After lifting his shirt and pointing to the wound on his stomach, Solo recounted the painful memories. Juliet patiently persuaded, causing the tense atmosphere in the room to gradually ease. But just then, Solo remembered another painful memory. On the day the rebellion occurred, he witnessed the sheriff point a gun at his father's head and force him to open the vault. Russell shouted, demanding his son not to open the door. In the end, Russell was cruelly shot dead by the sheriff. At that moment, Solo felt utterly helpless, remembering only his father's instruction to protect the vault. But Juliet's words awakened Solo like a light shining into his mind. Russell had sacrificed his life to protect his son, and the two intruders in the food storage were also just desperate parents, trying to protect their child's life. When he learned that Rick and Audrey had a hungry child, Solo was finally touched to the depths of his heart. He realized that from beginning to end, everyone was just trying to protect their children. Solo let go of his guard, unhesitatingly leading everyone to the vault to open its door. For the first time, the scene inside the vault was fully revealed before everyone's eyes. Pictures of various birds were plastered all over the walls, paper cranes hung from the ceiling, and there was an elaborate boat and other precious items they had never seen in this silo. Afterward, Solo continued to lead them into a deeper library within the vault. Juliet's eyes were drawn to a painting on the wall. The painting seemed to reflect an image of herself after stepping out of the silo. The only difference was that the painting was filled with fresh green colors and freely flying birds. Then, Solo handed the protective helmet to Juliet. At this moment, Juliet admitted that she had found another protective suit. She apologized for not sharing this earlier. Solo asked why Juliet didn't leave as soon as she had the protective suit. Juliet didn't answer, but Solo seemed to understand something. He gently placed his hand on her shoulder to show his appreciation. Meanwhile, Lucas was preparing to go out to inform Holland about an important discovery he had just decoded regarding the lower level of the silo. However, he couldn't find Holland anywhere. Later, from the Deputy Director of Judicial, he learned that Holland would only return in the evening due to important business. It turned out that Holland was always closely monitoring the surveillance cameras in Walker's room on the lower level. Through the conversation between Walker and Knox, Holland discovered that Billings had betrayed the upper level and joined the lower level forces. The rebels' plan was thus discovered by Holland in advance, giving him time to prepare. After Knox left, Holland immediately sent a threatening message through Walker's computer. He warned that if Walker wanted to ensure her friend's safety, she had to stay in the room and not leave. Then, he immediately went to the police station and announced shocking news to everyone. The rebels are preparing a new attack. They plan to steal explosives from the supply depot to destroy the silo door. What surprised everyone even more was that the leader of this attack was Billings himself. Therefore, Holland immediately decided to dismiss Billings and announced that the position of sheriff would be temporarily vacant. At the same time, he ordered all guards to move to the cafeteria to turn it into a temporary prison. On the other side, Lucas decided to go down to the lower level himself to discover the truth about the tunnels. When he reached the isolation zone, he was stopped by guards. Lucas immediately presented his blue pass, asserting that he was sent by the mayor. As soon as Lucas passed through the isolation door, he was captured by the lower level residents. A large bearded man found the blue pass and, suspecting him of being a spy, ordered the others to take him back. However, when Lucas mentioned that he knew Juliet, everyone paused. At this time, the name Juliet had become a symbol of faith for everyone. Not long after, Shirley arrived at the scene. When Lucas said that Juliet might still be alive, Shirley showed an expression of disbelief. The two quickly went to a secret space under the floor. Shirley insisted that there was nothing below, and that there couldn't be a tunnel as Lucas said. But Lucas was still determined to investigate. Before heading down, he revealed the latest info about Juliet to Shirley. Turns out, Juliet did make it into another silo, but whether she's alive or dead is still up in the air. There was a camera on Juliet's helmet, but the signal was lost. The only thing for sure is that when the signal cut out, Juliet was still alive. What happened after that, nobody knows. After saying this, he carefully grabbed a flashlight and started climbing down the rope. He took a deep breath, let go, and jumped straight down. Luckily, the water was only thigh deep. Lucas switched on his flashlight and kept exploring. Finally, he found the hidden tunnel shown in the computer blueprints. A sudden sound startled him. Lucas replied that he came here under the instructions of Salvador Quinn. The robot's next words revealed a shocking truth. Throughout the years, only 3 people had ever come to this mysterious door: Salvador Quinn, Mary Meadows, and George Wilkins. What surprised Lucas even more was that both Quinn and Meadows had received the same mysterious instructions. Now, this important task would be passed on to Lucas. The scene shifted to Juliet's father. His eyes were filled with tears, and the silence around him was so profound that the ticking of the clock could be heard. After hearing the news from Shirley that his daughter might still be alive, Nicole became agitated. Although there had been many rumors about Juliet's death before, this time he believed Shirley's words more than ever. The news that Juliet was alive brought intense hope to Mechanical. To escape from here, they would have to confront Mayor Holland and his armed forces head-on. A fight was inevitable. Very quickly, the key members of Mechanical gathered at Walker's house. Knox brought a drawing and emphasized that everyone present was trustworthy. According to the plan, Knox and Shirley would split into 2 teams to attack the obstacles on the middle level of the silo. The goal this time was not to win, but to buy time. While they attracted attention, the others would install explosives on the generator to threaten Holland. Although this plan was very risky and could plunge the entire silo into eternal darkness, they currently had no other choice. Knox emphasized repeatedly that this plan must be kept secret. If the news leaked out, all their efforts would be in vain. However, they didn't know that Holland was standing in front of the surveillance screen, clearly hearing their entire plan. Holland immediately decided to act first. He rushed to the sanitation department and ordered all task force members to immediately arrest the rebels and secure the generators. When giving the order, Holland specifically emphasized mobilizing everyone, leaving no one behind. The task force members quickly took action. They brought a large oil drum, tightened it with iron chains, and then blew a whistle, calling the 2 task force members standing in front of the iron door to come out. The people from Mechanical, seeing the task force left, were confused and didn't understand what was happening. Just then, the heavy oil drum fell from above, hitting one person on the head and knocking him unconscious instantly. The footsteps of the task force quickly echoed from the stairs. One person hastily turned back and ran quickly towards the lower level, quickly informing everyone about the crackdown. When the task force reached the lower level, Knox, Shirley, and the others were already holding sticks, ready to confront them. A fierce hand-to-hand battle immediately broke out. Sheriff Billings was hiding in a room, but was quickly captured by the task force. Faced with a group of people equipped with modern weapons, the lower-level residents were completely helpless in resisting. Shirley, Knox, and the others were all captured. Holland once again made a decisive move from afar. He took the key to the safe out of his pocket, looked at it for a moment, and then took a deep breath, a smug smile appearing on his face. The current judge saw Holland's troops advancing to the lower level. A feeling of unease rose in his heart because, during the meeting with the mayor, he had met privately with Sheriff Billings and had helped him deliver a letter. If Holland found out about this, perhaps his entire family would not escape the fate of being purged, so he had to prepare an escape route in advance. Sim's wife told him that they now had to find a way into the safe. Only when their family of 3 was inside could they ensure their safety. By this time, all the rebels had been imprisoned in the temporary prison. Knox and the others had been taken away by the task force and transferred to the police station, where Carla was also being held. The mayor had specifically ordered that they be imprisoned together. What was even more surprising was that Walker was not imprisoned at all. Instead, she received thanks from the judicial. At this point, everyone suddenly realized the truth. Walker was the traitor. When Walker tried to take Carla with her, she was firmly rejected. Elsewhere, Dr. Nicole was still caring for the injured patients. He urgently wanted to take them upstairs, because a large amount of explosives had been discovered on the lower level. At this time, most of the task force had gathered in the corridor of the lower-level mechanical department, preparing to check the condition of the generators. The generators were fully rigged with explosives. After the members carefully observed, they found that the wires connected to the explosives were not connected. They then warned everyone not to shoot to avoid an accident. When Walker arrived at Holland's office, she was warmly welcomed as a hero who had suppressed the rebellion. But just then, Walker revealed a shocking secret. Due to the loud noise from Mechanical, they had developed a complex signaling system over the years, able to conduct a conversation without making any sound. All the images on the surveillance screen were deliberately shown to Holland by Walker. It turned out that when Knox came to meet Walker to negotiate, Walker had signaled to Knox that they were being watched. When Holland heard this, he immediately panicked, and Walker began to count down from 5 to 1. Holland's gaze shifted to the clock. Just then, a subordinate pushed open the door and brought good news. The bombs had been defused in time. Just as Holland breathed a sigh of relief, Walker grabbed the bag next to her and dumped out all the items inside. The badges of all the sheriffs fell to the ground. At this moment, Holland realized that the situation had become serious. Suddenly, a deafening explosion sounded from outside. It turned out that Nicole wasn't protecting the injured, but was transporting a large quantity of detonators. They had long ago placed explosives on the stairs. Before taking action, Nicole took off his watch and handed it to Hank, who was standing nearby. Then instructed that if Juliet was alive, to give this watch to her and tell her that her father always loved her. As the man retreated to the upper levels, Nicole held the detonators, preparing to face death. At the moment he closed his eyes, he decisively connected the detonators. This explosion had terrible power, destroying the entire staircase between level 90 and level 92. All the task force members were trapped on the lower level, and the rebellion had now officially begun. At the police station, Sheriff Billings and the others were released. They immediately ran to the cafeteria, freeing all those who were being held captive. This group was carrying sticks and shouting, "Tell us the truth!" Seeing the crowd rushing in, Holland panicked. At this point, there was no one left on the upper level who could protect them. He yelled, ordering his men to find the peacekeepers who could defend them. Just then, Lucas suddenly appeared in front of him. Turns out, when Lucas discovered the tunnel on the lower level, through a conversation with a smart robot, he learned a shocking truth. Everyone in the silo was being monitored by the computers. Lucas immediately left the tunnel, wanting to inform the mayor. But on the way, he was captured by special forces and locked up with other rebels in the dining hall. It wasn't until now that he had a chance to meet Holland. Lucas immediately warns him not to speak out loud and to pretend they're having a normal conversation because they're likely being bugged. Just one wrong word and this whole silo could be in danger. Lucas finally reveals the shocking truth he discovered after cracking the code. Holland is left stunned. Lucas adds that this is the exact reason why Judge Meadows didn't want to be his apprentice. With that, Lucas leaves, and Holland is left staring blankly at the ceiling. Suddenly, he spots Sims and makes a crucial decision on the spot. Holland announces that Sims will be his new apprentice and hands him a key, telling him the code is 552,039. Then, Holland immediately heads to the cleaning department, grabs a protective suit, pushes through the crowd, and arrives at the sheriff's office. He fired a few shots at the ceiling to chase everyone away, then sat alone in the center of the police station. At this moment, in Silo 17, Solo suddenly remembered a preventative program. It wasn't a complex system but a pipe connected from outside into the silo, filled with poison gas strong enough to kill the entire silo. Solo recounted that initially, his parents had successfully sealed this pipe and safely left the silo. At that time, the outside was still safe and everyone survived. But for some unknown reason, suddenly everyone started to fall. When they searched for documents on a desk, they discovered the exact location of the pipe, on level 14 of the silo. As Juliet and Solo were preparing to go to level 14, a strong tremor suddenly occurred. Solo immediately realized that the situation was not good. Surely another silo had encountered a problem. They hastily returned to the vault and retrieved the previously found protective suit, but discovered that the suit had been bitten through by rats. Only the protective suit made by Juliet, using other materials, was usable. Just then, the protective suit and Solo suddenly disappeared. Juliet frantically called Solo's name, eventually finding him outside the water tank. Solo emerged and told Juliet that he had used duct tape to seal the glove's position. Solo remembered the important things his parents had mentioned. If the protective suit could remain leak-proof underwater, it could prevent poison gas. After hearing this, Juliet felt a warmth in her heart. The rebellion nearby was still ongoing. The crowd was divided into two factions. One faction wanted to capture Holland to find out the truth, and wanted to escape the silo. The other believed that the time was not yet right. The conflict between the two factions erupted fiercely in the cafeteria. The situation was completely out of control. Suddenly, a figure appeared on the surveillance screen. Juliet, wearing the firefighter suit, had returned to Silo 18 to clean the camera. She left a message warning them not to leave. This message was seen by everyone, and they cheered in celebration. Then she walked to the entrance, took out a crowbar, and tried to pry open the door. But no matter how hard she tried, it wouldn't budge. In a moment of desperation, the door suddenly opened strangely. Juliet cautiously entered. However, just as she was about to reach the silo door, a figure wearing a protective suit emerged. It was Holland. He held a gun pointed directly at Juliet, but he didn't intend to kill her. Instead, he wanted to end his own life, because he had just discovered the truth about the preventative program. His entire world collapsed. He understood that this program was a system that could kill everyone at any time. This made him feel that all his efforts to maintain the silo over the years had become meaningless. Just then, Juliet informed Holland of important news. She had found a way to turn off that program. They had to return to the silo immediately to shut it down before the poison gas was released. Before she could finish, the door behind them began to slowly close. Holland and Juliet were trapped inside, and soon after, intense flames erupted. Thus, the main story of Season 2 came to a close. Juliet's survival or death remained a mystery. Meanwhile, Sims, along with his wife and son, had entered the safe zone they had long desired. There, they encountered an intelligent robot. When Sims declared that he wanted to rescue Silo, the robot presented a cruel condition. Sims and his son had to leave, only his wife could stay. Just then, the screen suddenly changed, taking us back to the outside world. A sky with gently falling rain, streets bustling with vehicles, and a vibrant scene. However, this world was not entirely safe. Everyone, before entering their homes, had to go through a radiation scan. Through the conversations of passers-by, a shocking truth was revealed. America had been attacked with nuclear weapons, and they were discussing a response plan. This plan was called Silo. With this unexpected ending, Season 2 not only answered many questions, but also raised many more. Did Juliet survive? What was the true purpose of the preventative program? These dramatic questions will likely be answered in Season 3.